As you all are aware, with lots of news reports and even Kamala Harris declaring it a national emergency, it's been quite a year for women in the workforce. Millions of women have left. And I don't know, many of you probably have attended these economic forecast breakfasts, and no one's really talking about this. They're all saying sort of, oh yeah, the economy is going to come back. Let's not, worry about it. I think that all of us know that our economy will never go back to normal without the return of women in the workforce. The lost dual income is going to seriously impact our economy and worsen what we like to call the leaky pipeline, which is, women get to a certain stage in their career and they leave because, the work of home, caring for, aging parents and children, it just eventually catches up with us and we can't keep up. So if we don't work on that, this lost income is really going to make our economy pretty bad. I believe that every organization has a vested interest in helping to solve this problem and partnering around solving this issue. It's key to success for not just Colorado, but nationwide. And that's why we're partnering with TARRA today and Kate Bailey. Kate and I have known each other for, I guess, several years now, right, Kate? And we realize that TARRA aligns very well with our vision and work around growth for women to the highest levels in the workforce. So thankful to be partnering with Kate and TARRA today, and want to turn it over to Kate briefly to talk about the event and our work today.
Thank you so much, Kristin. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you all so much for coming today. My name is Kate Bailey. I'm the founder and CEO of TARRA, and we are just looking forward to an incredible event with CWCC and Metropolitan State University. Launched in 2015, TARRA is an ecosystem in Denver that's accelerating female and female-identifying professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. And our mission is to provide women with the education, professional tools, resources, and network they need to thrive in today's rapidly changing world. Needless to say, the world has changed very rapidly for everybody. And, but Kristin and I are really talking about the fact that these challenges that we're feeling, this is not because of the pandemic. The challenges that women are feeling in the workplace they're the same. They've just been amplified by COVID.
Absolutely. And I think, if we don't keep women growing, right, both women-owned businesses as well as women in the workforce, we're never going to change the systems that exist today. And especially for women-owned businesses, a lack of funding has always been a problem, but COVID made it even worse. We heard stories from so many women-owned businesses that didn't have access and didn't bank with large banks, and therefore didn't get the much needed PPP funding originally that so many other businesses got. Thankfully we connected a lot of our members with, the banks that support the Women's Chamber, but I know it was a huge problem.
Absolutely. And, I think that kind of information has certainly started to surface. You all are going to hear an incredible presentation with a lot of data and information. And Kristin and I, this event kind of came about. I emailed her, I think 2-3 months ago. And I said, hey, I'm thinking about the fact that we're hearing all of this data and statistics, but there's no information out there about what communities can actually do to correct the course and get women back to the workforce. We heard about all the problems, but there was no solutions. Nobody was solving it. And I'm kind of an eternal optimist, I guess. I see crisis as an opportunity for change and transformation. And, I really believe that the moment is right now, not just to get women back to work. Let's not just get women back to the status quo of where we were at, which, in 2020, early 2020, things were better. I mean, we were starting to close some gaps. I was reading a great study from 2019 about the state of women in business, and everything looked very rosy, but it still wasn't enough. And so what I'm talking about today is, let's use this as an opportunity, not just to get back to where we were in March of 2020, let's exceed that. Let's get to where we really want to be. And to do that, though, as Kristin was saying, this is going to take a coordinated and concerted effort from everybody. I mean, this is going to be leaders, this is government, this is communities, this is corporations, it's small businesses, but most of all, it's an individual thing. we have all got to commit, our friends, our family, we have all got to commit to this. And that is really what we're hoping to kind of provide a catalyst for you today.
And, you know, the event, as always, and it's funny, this is really where, at least at the CWCC, our eyes opened very wide. I think it was our second annual State of Women in Business. And we had different presentations, as we always do, from, you know, government, technology, and they were all talking about the problems, right? So there's not enough women in technology. There's not enough women in the highest levels of government. And when we asked for feedback from that event, it was women that told us, yeah, we get it. And we're doing everything we know to do to try and change this. What we need organizations to now do for us is to define the how. How are we going to solve this, right? We know the problem, I think, and you know, we get bits and pieces from organizations about what things they're doing to solve this, right? But where's the manual for the how? How are we going to develop a toolkit with our partners and sponsors throughout the series and then share it with our community? And that's the goal of today's event.
Absolutely. I think that, you know, Kristin and I are both people who are doers, and this is definitely part of our doing. And so I'm really excited to announce this Executive Roundtable series that kicks off today with our research partner, Metropolitan State University. We have a team of researchers from the university who are going to spend the next 4 months diving into a variety of topics that we have kind of identified as central to getting women back into the workforce at higher rates of pay and with more opportunities for advancement, particularly for our BIPOC, AAPI, and LGBTQ women. And today we are kicking that off with this community conversation, and we are so excited. There's 131 people, and I keep seeing more and more logging on, which is so thrilling. So we're really kicking off with this community conversation, but the other roundtables are going to also include, and we've got a great group of leaders and executives today, but just so you know that these other roundtables that we're going to be conducting over the next few months, they are going to include key communities, you know, leaders and members, but they're also going to include the workers. We want professionals, hourly wage workers, small business owners, entrepreneurs, because the thing is that like we always get what the leaders want. We always, you know, they're the ones that are out there creating the policy and creating the ideas. But we know that the most important thing and the most important innovation comes from you. And so we want to hear what you have to say. We want to hear your ideas. We want to know what your experiences are, what they have been, what you would like them to be. And that's really what today is about, is to listen to your voices. And then in September, we're going to unveil the findings from our research partners, and we're going to do it in person. So stay tuned for that. We've already started talking about that. It's going to be a great event, a great celebration. And really the idea is to provide our communities, our leaders, our government, as well as individuals with a roadmap of recommendations and best practices on how we can move forward into a new era with true equal pay and true equal access to opportunities for advancement for all.
And, you know, I know sometimes it's hard, but just a reminder, you're in a safe space. You don't have to hold back today. We want you to share it all. We want to hear about the good, the bad, the ugly, bright lights, everything from the past year and even before that. We're here today to truly make change. And I feel like in order to do that, we need to have the difficult conversations. So we're so excited that you're here, but that also you're not just attending an event, you're a part of making a change in the words that you share. So looking forward so much to that. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Tara, for the partnership. Thank you to our sponsors, HealthOne, Metropolitan State University. I remember mentioning this to Dr. Janine Davidson, who we'll hear from later, and she was absolutely pumped about this work and how they can help and use their research and programming to really begin to change this. Also want to thank Holder FCI. And thank you to our future roundtable partners, Deloitte and Lockton, and to our community partners today, the Queer Business Alliance, Good Business Colorado, the Southern Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, And I also want to thank dearly the support of our board of directors and our young professionals board. Wave your hand, use an emoji, whatever you need to do to let everybody know you're here. And again, just a reminder and a thank you. The event would not be possible without the support of our presenting sponsor, HealthOne. They have been so supportive of this event for years. They were the founding partner, and it was, Dan Davidson's idea along with CWCC to do this event. So with that, I'd love to welcome Maureen McDonald, AVP for Community Engagement with HCA Healthcare Continental Division, HealthOne in Denver, and Wesley Health in Wichita to speak on their behalf. Welcome, Maureen. Are you there, Maureen?
I am now.
Okay,
Thank
great.
You. I think I had been muted. Anyway, well, first of all, I'm just so excited just from these first opening remarks. So thank you, Kate. Thank you, Kristin, your board members, your team. The Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, we're really pleased to be partnering with you on today's topic specifically, which has such great impact on women and the economy. And your words about the changes that COVID drew to our attention are important. And as you said, Kate, this is an opportunity for us to go beyond the pre-COVID experiences and go further with women's leadership. I feel really proud to be part of HealthOne, where we have lots of women in the C-suite and are led by a woman who is responsible for a very large and successful part of HCA healthcare. So the last 15 months, of course, have been unprecedented by those of us in healthcare as we felt the impact of the pandemic acutely. We are incredibly proud of the way our nurses, caregivers, and doctors showed up for extraordinary work during uncertain times, day after day. We felt and we're really grateful for the incredible support of the community during the COVID peak. So if you were among those who did things like deliver bagels to hospitals and bang the pans at night, know that we heard you and that we really deeply appreciated it. Now we're helping end the pandemic. We've administered over 110,000 doses of vaccine, including for those in vulnerable communities who might not otherwise have received the vaccine. We're also bringing clinical experts in physical and mental health to community conversations. We volunteer for and financially support many direct service nonprofits. These are just a few that you're seeing on the screen. Many of our leaders serve on boards of nonprofits and chambers, including this one. Kristin mentioned Vice President Dan Davidson, who was on the CWCC board for several years, and now AVP Angie Ananaya is in that role. We're also really proud of our recent recognition for the second year in a row by IBM Watson Health. They rate hospitals and health systems across the country on quality, health outcomes, and patient experience. In 2021, we are recognized as the top health system in the state of Colorado and in the top 5 nationally. So thank you again, all of you, for listening, for your engagement in this important conversation, and for the opportunity to participate in the event. Thank you.
Thank you, Maureen. And thank you so much to HealthOne for your continued support of the CWCC and for vaccinating and for doing everything that you've done during COVID to help us open back up again. I cannot wait. So thank you. Get ready for an interactive and informative event. We're going to start with a data presentation from the Denver Economic Development and Opportunity Office to sort of lay the foundation and share more data on the impact of the pandemic. And then we want to hear from you in our community breakouts. We want to hear what ideas and solutions you have to support women in business as they return to the workforce, but also how we keep them there so that they don't leave in the first place. And then following our breakouts, we have gathered community leaders for our first executive roundtable discussion series on how we get women back into the workforce, and that's led by Dr. Janine Davidson. So just a few suggestions to make your State of Women experience good. I get it, and I'm with you. We're experiencing Zoom fatigue. Hopefully this is our last large event over Zoom. We will continue some programs digitally because it works really well, but our large events are going to go back in person. So we get having your video off as needed, but we highly encourage you to have your cameras on for the breakouts. It just really helps when we're sharing deep information, and it's going to be more engaging for everyone if you do. As always, select speaker view in the top right-hand corner on your Zoom screen. It's going to allow you to view who the speaker is. And before we look towards creating solutions, we must gain an understanding into the issues and challenges that women face in the workforce. So now I want to welcome Lisa Martinez-Templeton, economist and data scientist with the Department of Finance and Office of the CFO, and Jonathan Steiner, data administrator with Denver Economic Development and Opportunity Office, otherwise known as DEDO. Really smart people. I'll turn it back over to you all for the data presentation today.
Great, thank you. Just give me 1 second to share my screen here. Get going. All right. Are you guys seeing it?
Yep.
That's great. So thank you for the warm welcome. Thank you for the honor of being here, frankly. We are excited to glean as much as possible from you all about ideas on how to improve some of the systemic issues that we are facing in our economy regarding gender as well as race for that matter. With that being said, we're going to do a quick overview of some of the more general impacts that COVID has had on our economy at the level of the state, as well as more specifically kind of honed in on Denver. Then we're going to chat a little bit about impacts on women specifically, more geared towards employment data that we've been monitoring. And then lastly, we want to talk to you about what the city is trying to do in terms of leading an inclusive and innovative recovery down the road. So with that all being said, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Lisa, who's going to talk us through some of those more general impacts. Lisa.
Great, thank you, Jonathan. So I'll just go ahead and get us started here. So next slide, please. It's no surprise that COVID-19 has been a shock to economies worldwide. It's already resulted in the steepest decline of US economic activity that we've seen since World War II. This is expected to lead to a decline in Denver Metro's GDP of up to 8.7% overall based on estimations, and that we could take up to 2 years to fully recover from this. The decline has both short and long-term effects for Denver. Over 200,000 jobs in the Denver County were vulnerable to COVID-related job loss, reduced hours, or furlough. And unfortunately, many of these jobs are concentrated in sectors with low wages, and almost half of the jobs at risk affect small businesses that had fewer than 100 full-time employees. Next slide, please. And here we just have an employment rate, and you see what a shock it was. When the pandemic first hit, that March-April period was really just nearly a cliff when everything shut down and we saw the steepest decline of jobs. It's somewhat leveled out, but as you can see, particularly for Denver County, we're still far above the 2.7% that we were at in terms of unemployment pre-pandemic. Next slide, please. So what you're looking at here are business and consumer confidence indexes. On the left there is the Leeds Business Confidence Index, and this one is Colorado specific, and it actually improved for Q2, made gains year over year and quarter over quarter, pushed the index strongly into positive territory at 64.4, which was actually a 16.5 gain from last quarter. Reasons cited were pace of vaccination and expectations about easing economic conditions. Looking a little further out to Q3, the index is showing panelists anticipating strong improvement to 68.8, which would actually be a record high in the 19-year history of the index. On the right there, you're looking at the Consumer Sentiment Index. And this actually rose to its highest level in a year for March at 84.9. However, something just want to point out there is that there's been a growing divide among the households who retain their jobs and those that lost jobs and therefore income. While they started both at 71.9 a year ago in April 2020, the entirety of the latest month's data was actually due to households with incomes below 75,000. And that's just the last data point available. The recent revival in spending actually mainly reflects drawdowns in precautionary savings, which were predominantly held by those households that retained their jobs and incomes. So just again, pointing out that, the disparity that we're starting to see between a little bit of the, the have and the have-nots as we move forward into recovery. Next slide, please. So this one is just, the underlying economic assumptions looking forward in terms of Denver's forecast that we have. You've heard it, the most direct benefit to economic recovery is going to come from our public health getting under control. Consumer spending is expected to surge this year or later this year and into next. While 2020 was actually concentrated for consumer spending in durable goods, there's expected to be a pivot and a shift in 2021 more towards non-durables and services, which actually will benefit Denver's economy more. We see continued successful vaccination efforts with in the forecast with 60% of the adult population vaccinated by mid-2021. And as more of the population becomes vaccinated, people will feel steadily more comfortable leaving the house to spend additional funds that they may have saved up. And this is already becoming evident. We see increasing numbers of people going through TSA airport checkpoints. We see increases in seated dinner reservations on OpenTable, as well as rising Google mobility indexes, which is, those are the indexes that tell us where people are going, whether they're staying in home, they're returning to workplace, they're going to retail restaurants, etc. Longer term expectations are for, we're really anticipating a boost from the federal infrastructure investment. Longer term economic research is really in strong agreement that public infrastructure provides a significantly positive contribution to GDP and employment. Federal investment is not driven solely by market forces or, purely profit. Instead, it really has the goal of improving quality of life and reducing inequalities, supporting the work of the federal government itself, and also addressing other broader social objectives that policymakers may have. And so you'll see under there, it's not only with the American Recovery dollars, traditional infrastructure, so transportation, water, power, but also embedded into this is really an emphasis on social infrastructure. And so these are the things that would really benefit women moving forward. So looking at things like healthcare, education, housing, childcare support. That's where really that's going to start to come into play and trying to address some of those systemic inequalities that we know exist, and really trying to move plans forward to correct them. There's still a lot of uncertainty. Again, public health, not only domestic, but we're still affected globally. So as long as it's raging worldwide, we'll still have to deal with it. The second thing we've got on there, is work from anywhere implications. The impact of this is actually as higher skilled workers begin to work from home or leave the city altogether, actually, they withdraw spending from local consumer service industries that rely heavily on their demand. And as a result, it's actually those low skilled service workers, again, primarily held by females and minorities, that actually end up bearing most of the economic impact in these types of situations. Which of course, just brings up the concern for an inequitable economic recovery. There exists very tangible disparities between different parts of the economy, where some sectors are doing well and have fully recovered, while others really haven't recovered much at all. That being said, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Jonathan, and he'll give you a little bit of a deeper dive on some women-specific data points.
Thanks, Lisa. So, as Lisa was talking about unemployment being at 7.1 here in Denver most recently, we're still higher than most surrounding areas, Colorado, our region, or even the nation. And a lot of that's driven by the fact of what Lisa was saying, which is the industries that really help Denver are really those face-to-face service industries. We have a lot of hotels, we have a lot of restaurants, the leisure hospitality sector, along with personal care and and convention centers and tourism, all these kind of lower wage, service-oriented positions are generally held at a higher or predominantly held by women and individuals of color. So it's really no surprise that when you're looking at the unemployment being experienced by women right now in Denver area, it's 4 points higher than men. It's also no surprise then that we have those inequities also showing their face in terms of the white labor force in comparison to our communities of color, whether Hispanic, Black, or other. But I do want to point out here that something that's been said, I think, a lot today actually, is that COVID has just exacerbated a systemic issue that we see of inequity between men and women in the economy. If you look at the green bars, I think the telling story there is frankly that even when our economy was doing well, female or women unemployment was still almost double that of the male counterparts. And when you're looking at communities of color, we see a similar dynamic. So I think no matter how we recover over the next couple months, equity and inclusion has really got to be at the forefront. I also really like the statement earlier about in times of trouble, there's a real opportunity. And this is that real opportunity. We can move government a lot easier right now. We can get more innovative because in these times of trouble, I think folks are just looking for the right solution. And so there's real opportunity here as well. I thought I hit next. On the next slide, if it wants to go, there we go. This slide's really pointing to educational attainment by occupation kind of. So what you're seeing here is that predominantly women occupy the space of high school diplomas or less in terms of job requirements. As a result of that, their average pay rate is kind of in that $16 an hour kind of range. And more importantly, during COVID, further exacerbated again, is that we saw a decline of about 11% in employment in that area. Now, the inverse is that as education level goes up as a requirement, you'll see that men tend to be the more dominant part of the labor force. The other impact of this inverse kind of trend line is that also wages obviously go up. So we'll see about 32 an hour here and about 62 an hour at the far right-hand side. Now, furthering this issue is also the fact that over here, where women are the predominant part of the labor force, we saw 11% contraction. Over here, where men are predominantly part of the labor force, we actually saw a 5% growth through COVID. So we're really seeing a widening of the systemic issue that we were just discussing. So what are we going to do about it? Well, this is where, under the leadership of Mayor Hancock, on April 28th, we announced a framework called Rise Denver, Rebuilding for an Inclusive and a Sustainable Economy, which its mission is to meet and surpass pre-crisis economic activity while ensuring the benefits of prosperity reach the entire population, including our most under-resourced residents and businesses. So again, speaking to some of the systemic issues we found, this recovery has to take everybody into consideration. Here you're going to see our main 5 strategy pillars kind of that underlie the Rise Denver strategy. Now, these strategies are really umbrellas, and under them, we're going to have tactics and programs where the rubber really meets the road. Now, those specific tactics and programs, they really need to come from folks like yourselves. We need to get more community input on what an inclusive and diverse economy looks like. And we need to understand what are the tactics or policies that are really going to help us get there from your perspective, helping us identify the problems that you're experiencing out there. So with that being said, we have several town halls being announced later this week. And we also have Bang the Table, an online platform where we'll be collecting input from folks like yourselves. So we'll be in close contact with CWCC to gather your feedback. And frankly, the report you guys are putting out in September couldn't be more timely from that perspective. So with that being said, that was just a short, quick high level, but we wanted to kind of stop there and obviously open to questions if there are any, or here's our contact info as well.
Thank you so much, Jonathan. That was amazing. Thank you to both of you. That was a fantastic presentation. I mean, it's good and bad data, but I'm so happy that, you know, the city is trying to do something about it. So thanks so much. So now that we have that knowledge and understanding, again, getting back to the how, right? How are we going to change this? You know, we heard the information from Lisa and Jonathan, and it sets the baseline for us, but now we want to go into breakouts and hear from you all about how we're going to change it. So what can we do in our companies, businesses, and communities for women in business? So in our breakouts, we want some time to hear from you. What has your experience been? And what ideas do you have on how we can be part of the solution? So we'll now go into breakouts and we'll see you back in a few.
Put ideas into that chat room. We're going to capture that and get it to the researchers. I see Dr. Annie Butler, who is our researcher from Metropolitan State in my purview. So she is here tonight, and definitely want to continue that conversation in the chat room so that we can capture all of the ideas. But with that, I'll turn it back over to Kristin.
Awesome. Thanks, Kate. Well, it's my great pleasure that I get to introduce our moderator for our very first Executive Roundtable series, Getting Women Back to Work. Please put any questions you have for our panelists in the chat. We're so grateful to have Dr. Janine Davidson moderating this important discussion. I mean, I don't know how many of you have met her, but I remember as soon as I found out that Dr. Davidson took her post at Metropolitan State University as president, I was so excited. And Kathy Lucas with Metro was on our board, and I reached out to Kathy and I said, hey, I just want to meet her. Please, like, can you help me meet her? She's such a badass. And she came and spoke to our leadership group, our very first leadership program. And when I tell you that mouths were agape, I am not kidding you. She has such an incredible story and is so amazing to women. So we're so lucky to have her here today. She served as president of Metropolitan State University of Denver since 2017. She's a national thought leader in higher education and on topics such as public service, US foreign policy, and national security. Prior to her time at Metropolitan State University, Davidson served as the 32nd Undersecretary of the US Navy, an appointment that followed nearly 30 years of academic, civilian, and military service. So we're so lucky to have her leading us in this panel conversation today. Accompanying her on the panel today is Dr. Shannon Block with the Markle Foundation, Danielle Shoots with the Daily Boss Up, Sonya Chavez, Looking to Leap, Ada Benyay, student seeking IT certifications, formerly telecom professional and graduate of the CWE program, Ann Ayers, senior executive, and Patrice Barber, career ConX. I mean, what an outstanding panel, holy cow. At this time, I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Davidson, to lead us.
Thank you, Kristin. Thank you so much for your leadership and your energy. I'm so freaking sick of these Zoom calls, and I'm so excited to do this in person. So let's just enjoy this potentially last big Zoom that we have to do here. So whatever. We've got about 40 minutes, I think, or 35 minutes. So I want to just get right into it. I mean, we've already had a big opening. We kind of know what's going on here. Women are losing jobs faster than men, 5.3 million jobs during the pandemic. Women's labor force participation, they say, is at a 33-year low. I mean, some of these stats are just kind of not so great. You mentioned childcare, caregivers are in crisis. Nearly 1 million women who've left the workforce are mothers, Black, Hispanic, single moms, hard enough as it is. And now you've got your kid trying to learn how to, you're practically homeschooling them. All this is worse if for BIPOC women. Unemployment that was 6.3% in January and 5.1% for white women and 7.9% for Asian, 8.5% for Black women and 8.8% for Latinas. And the gender gap, pay gap keeps getting worse. Economists estimate the pandemic could increase it from 81 cents on the dollar back down to 76. So with that, happy news, I want to go around the panelists and just let's go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell your company, what you do in your current role, and how this really is relevant to the women in business issues. So I'll just go around the same list that Kristin will start with Shannon.
Great. Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Shannon Block, and I've been the CEO of for-profit and nonprofit organizations across our state. I currently serve as the Executive Director and Chief Digital Officer at the Markle Foundation. And so I work across nationwide collaboratives to enable unemployed and low-wage workers to emerge from this crisis stronger. I also serve on the board of directors of the International Women's Forum. I'm very involved in the Women's Forum of Colorado, where I've been the past president and chair of the board. So thanks for having me here today.
Right on. Wow. It's a whole panel of rock stars. Next up, Danielle.
Good evening, everybody. I feel like I'm the only one drinking wine, so I'll just start the process here so that we can enjoy our happy hour with each other too. So yeah, Dee Shoots, most people call me Dee, and I am the Chief Financial Officer for the Colorado Trust. We're a health equity foundation, about a $500 million health equity foundation, which means economic, education, and racial equity, social determinants of health at the root of everything we're doing in our systems right now. And I am the proud owner of the Daily Boss Up, which is a digital startup that provides sort of inspiration, leadership, and life coaching and lessons to young professionals right where they are, which is in their phone, and made from all the need for flexibility and lack of coaching for folks who are not at higher levels in their career, is how we started that company a few years ago. Really excited to be here with all of you.
It's great. Daily Boss Up. That's a cool name. Well done. Sonia?
Hello, everyone. My name is Sonya Chavez, and I'm actually here representing Queer Business Alliance. I'm one of the board members of Queer Business Alliance. And then I also have my own personal business called Looking to Leap, which is focused around leadership development, workshop creation, content creation. I work with a lot of women because, in my opinion, women value their growth from my perspective more than men, just because I really work with a lot of women who are just really seeking, how do I become a better version of myself? So I'm happy to be here and speak for the queer voice in the room, for sure.
That's interesting that you think that you find that women are more seeking that, learning to get better, or at least seeking help in doing so.
I go based off of what I see in learning development rooms, workshops, and then especially in the coaching space.
Yeah, interesting. Ida.
Thank you, Janine.
There you are.
Hi, my name is Ida Bayanin. I am a student at ACI Learning. I'm currently getting 4 certifications. I have been out of the industry for quite some time, probably over 10 years, and needed some certifications to get back into the workforce, and COVID kind of sped that up for me. In certifications, I'm getting Security Plus, Network Plus, A+ and EIDL 4. And once I finish, I will be looking for job opportunities in healthcare, financial services, or education.
Wow, very good. Anne.
It's good to see you, Denise. Thank you all for being here. And Kristin and Kate, huge shout out. You're just such rock stars. So I have to say I have 4 boys at home, which means I watch all these superhero like multiverse things. And I keep thinking if I could have a code name, I would want it to be the multiplier. So my career has really been about multiplying things. So I most recently was the dean of the Women's College at the University of Denver, where we grew our flagship program by 400%. And started a little fun project called Equity Labs, which is the university's first foray into working with teams to create more equitable workplaces. So that has been super, super fun. I sit on the board of the Equity Labs. I'm also in the middle of a bit of a COVID-inspired career change myself, taking a little bit of a break. But I think you'll see me in the fall finding another organization that I can help grow.
Very good, very good. Patrice.
I guess I do have to come off of mute for that.
There you are.
So Patrice Barber, CEO of Career Connects. I have to say, when I was selling my 3rd company in 2016, I thought there was a MarTech company. I thought I'd go be the COO in the acquiring company, but it ended up not being that way. So in 2019, I decided I'm going to launch a new company, another one. And that's where Career Connects came in. Of course, I didn't realize it was starting at the beginning of a pandemic, which threw a few loops for us in terms of how we were going to roll that out. But what we do at Career Connects is help people to figure out what their career path should be, take control of it, learn how to intentionally connect with their network and grow their network. When I met Jen, who's one of the folks that was on our brand new platform, after having 250 executives work with us on how to land their next position in under 90 days. And we've got to an 87% success rate with that. When I met Jen, she was a mom who hadn't been working for over 5 years. So money, so a lot of us that are experiencing this whole challenge of how do you get back to work after so long, she was frustrated. She was using the job boards, getting nowhere. And after we figured out how to pull together her plan, she was able to move ahead and get into her perfect ideal job at a 30-hour work week and at full pay. So that's the kind of thing that we help people do, is figure out how to take control, get beyond those challenges that a lot of us are talking about on our breakouts, like, oh my gosh, these numbers are horrible. So if you guys have folks that you're looking for help on that, please connect with me. We've got a lot of resources and a lot of things to help you out in solving this problem. It's a big one.
Yeah, that's we'll move into that sort of issue right there. You all are sort of already in the space. You are women business leaders. How have you been affected by the pandemic yourself or your business, perhaps? And you sort of hit on that a little bit, Patrice. So you can go first.
Yeah, so for us, obviously, we had a plan. We were going to roll out this app and our platform. We were going to go global. I had a road trip planned. And then there was no travel. So that really kiboshed it. And we had to take a big turn. In many ways, it helped move us forward faster in some of the digital aspects of what we were going to do. So that was the good side. But on the other side, we definitely lost a lot of revenue that we had intended to bring in, about 50%, which is, I think, a pretty common theme across most businesses. So pros and cons, honestly. There's always things that you can look at it and go, oh, how did it help me push forward? So,
sure. Yeah. Go ahead. Did I cut you off? No. Oh, okay. And does any of the other panelists want to share how you may have also been impacted by the pandemic?
I'll start just by saying that I'm just immensely blessed, and I think it's important to say that, and that I recognize that everything, even on the worst days in the last year, do not compare to what so many have gone through in the last year. So that's the first thing. I kind of had to put my money where my mouth is. In the last year, I have human resources under me, I have IT under me, and so directly responsible for how do we how do we get this right? How do we care for what's going on? And I remember we created a code around productivity that was just a COVID code that says, we don't expect you to be productive. Like, you can't have a kindergartner that you're trying to teach how to add 1 + 1 and be productive in the same way. And we just want you to use this code. We'll be able to track what it's meant for us. And I remember one employee complaining and saying, like, well, that really helps women or people with kids. And I said, yeah, that's what equity is, because folks with kids are being disproportionately impacted by what's going on right now. And so making sure that everyone could work from home, there's certain policies that we will change forever, because we've learned so much about what folks are capable of if you trust them to do what's best in their day, at the times of day that work for them, and all of that. So that's impacted us in a major way. And I think it's a time for us to learn about what is possible, and to be less stuck in what was. I don't want to recover back to what it was before. And so, like, looking at our businesses totally different as an opportunity now is a true gift that we can use if we do it right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm going to come back to this issue of flexible work, but the pros and the cons. But anybody else want to share how the pandemic may have affected them, or things that they've seen in their business? Yan, I'm going to look at you.
Yeah, I can jump in and say, a few months ago, actually about 8 months ago, I went and met a friend on a coffee date, at opposite ends of the bench. And I gave her a coffee mug that I just wish I had back. It's like, welcome. It said, welcome to the shit show. I think that's sort of a little bit how the year has gone. I do have the benefit of having a partner in my house, and that's been really great. He has been able to work from home through a lot of this, but he also was laid off last February. And he got back into a job in June, and that has been fantastic. My job change came under a little bit different circumstances, but nonetheless, we have that going on. And in the middle of that, my father passed away. So it has been, taking up on your invitation, Kristin, to just kind of be real. It's been a really hard year. And the boards that I sit on, we've had to really think hard about where our revenue is going to come from, and doing things, Dee, like you're talking about how do we make space for people to take the time and what they need. And I think we're starting to see the payoffs of doing that, right? Like, I think that the loyalty is better, and all those things are bigger, but it's been a tough year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm hearing both of you say, good news, bad news, right? I mean, there's almost this sort of, okay, we could fight like hell as a business, try to survive, or we can also reset our expectations. Like, this is the year, it's a freaking global pandemic. How do we want it? Well, we said at the university, how do we want to emerge from this, without, completely running ourselves into the ground? And what kind of compassion can we show up with? And it wasn't easy. It's not easy, because people are really suffering disproportionately, and you don't know what's happening to them in their home lives and everything else. And here you are as leaders or employers, and you can't fix everything,
Right.
You don't want to. But yeah. Ada, anything you want to share? How you've been affected, or how it's changed you?
Yeah, sure. I just first want to say the breakout rooms, the sharing was so personal, and it was touching, and I can relate to all of it. So the way the pandemic affected me was I was going to school on Herrera campus, and I was working part-time. My career track was totally different. I was going to enter Metro State College at their alternative health program, their brand new one. And I had the leisure of time. And when COVID hit, I really had to get back into the workforce, and I had to figure out how to do it quickly. When the campus shut down, I did lose my job. My hours kind of dwindled away, and then I lost my job. And then classes went online, and I felt very disconnected from my instructors and my classmates. It was just a really stressful time, but like the light at the end of the tunnel was, I got connected with CWE, the Center for Work Education and Employment, and they hooked me up with a scholarship to get my IT certifications. I've been out of IT for about 4 or 5 years. And to be able to be competitive, you need some certifications. And that's where I'm at. So the silver lining is that I got connected with a beautiful organization, nonprofit organization that really advocated for me to get a full scholarship. And now I'm about 3 weeks away from finishing my courses, and we'll be sitting to get 4 certifications in a few months. So
fantastic. That is such a story of so many of our students at MSU Denver. It just was this sort of wave of things happening. First you're stressed, then you have to go online, and then you lose your job, and now what? Yeah, it's just been these people's lives. So many people's lives have been disrupted, and what are we going to do to get our society back on track here? Who have I not called on yet? Sonia, on this question.
I knew it was coming.
Yeah.
So I actually had left my job in May of 2019 and went on a 6-month road trip, which somehow ended in January of 2020, and was about to kick off my business literally in March. So I have been navigating the pandemic as a new entrepreneur, which has been quite the journey. So I actually kind of felt like by that time, I really did feel like the world actually got thrown into the same unknown that I was already navigating. On a personal front, it was eye-opening for me to navigate a pandemic in a space where my dad was actually going through cancer treatment. And so my perspective, I'm normally a pretty laid back person. I don't get scared of a lot of things. I don't overthink things a lot too often, but I had to be really thoughtful of the impacts on him, and every action that I was taking, I had to always be thinking back to him. And so that was definitely a different way for me to have to navigate, and especially the initial parts of COVID, because I had to go and at one point help take care of him for a couple of weeks through a stem cell replacement. And so that was probably like the most personal impact, but I had the same experience that I'm hearing across the panel of being in a service like coaching and leadership space where like that has actually amplified through the pandemic, where people are actually seeking and wanting more of this skill. But across the board, to me, what it's taught is surrender, that at some point we all have to surrender that we are not the top dog on this earth, that there is a wisdom that is greater than us, and it has the control, and it's called nature. And how do we learn how to transform the way that we operate in the world? And what is nature trying to teach us? And so that's kind of been my journey, is looking at how I'm being in the world and how I want that to change and how I want to create that more as well in every facet of life and everything that I do.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. I mean, I think a lot of people have sort of had a wake-up call to things like their own mortality, how are they spending their time, and all those things. And I'm going to pivot to another question. I'm going to go to Shannon. How do you think we can get so many women whose lives have been disrupted back to work? And do you think that men are going to actually sort of take these roles that were previously filled by women, or is there just some inertia that we're going to have to just get over and find ways to handle that?
Well, first I want to say, Anne, I appreciate that cup that said, welcome to the shit show. I have those socks, but I haven't worn socks or shoes for a long time during the pandemic. It's more like slippers or no slippers. So that definitely resonated with me. That's a meaty question that you asked. We saw in the presentation before, when we think about women displaced by the pandemic, we heard about occupations like retail and tourism and the restaurant business. And we know jobs are changing. The future of work is already here. Some jobs are going to go away forever. And so we've got a situation where we can get people jobs that satisfy these short-term employment needs, but they have potential long-term risks for elimination by automation. And so the facts are that nearly half of all working women work in jobs paying low wages. And then the share of low wages is higher among Black women and Hispanic and Latina women. And so I think one of the opportunities that we have right now that we didn't really have in the past is we can use big data to see how people actually transitioned out of low wage work into more economically viable and sustainable occupations. And now, sort of for the first time, we can combine that with real-time labor market trend data, and we can use that evidence to like craft and drive our workforce strategies and partnerships. So when we look at women like displaced by the pandemic, there's 77 of what I would call hidden gateway occupations that have been springboards for women for economic advancement. So it helps them move into a set of larger, good, viable jobs. So when we look at occupations in like healthcare, manufacturing, construction, digital roles, like about 40% of the good, viable job growth in the next 12 months is in those areas. But there's all these high barriers for accessing those jobs. And then decision makers can help people become more aware of these job progressions, making them more accessible, especially for like Black women and others facing structural challenges in advancement. And I think the conversation shouldn't just be about a job, but longer term thinking related to the individual is where sort of the opportunity is at. And when we look at addressing the racial and gender barriers across those 77 occupations, we do see men transitioning faster, but all boats are rising consistently across those job progressions. And some of that movement includes understanding the value of transferable skills as well as networks. And it's a complicated question because our workforce ecosystems don't have a single point of control. But generally speaking, our skills and our relationships are the currency of workforce. So if we want to break that down more practically, just real quick, like in training, we can look at things like the number of women employable graduates, the median return on investment for women on training programs. We can make sure we're aligning our training curriculums to labor market trends and skills that employers actually care about. Like in job postings, I think we can make progress by clearly articulating the skills needed for a position and interviewing relative to those skills and getting our bias out of our hiring and promotion and retention strategies. I think we can adopt like a mindset of a culture fit versus like forget the culture fit, lean into the culture add. And if you have like gender bias language in your job postings, in your performance reviews, in your emails, like stop that shit. Like there's automated programs now that can flag your problems so you can like self-correct, kind of like Microsoft Word spell check. Like do it for your gender bias words and get that stuff out of there. And then I think finally we can arm ourselves with like the coaching and support services available in our community to help women navigate some of these challenges. I was so excited when I heard about Ada, the connection with CWE and some of those other great organizations. I would also make a plug real quick. I'm launching a partnership with Sync Up Colorado in collaboration with Ben and Lucy Walton. And we're going to be handing out $5 million in Colorado to help address some of these issues. So if you're hearing us talk and you're like, bullshit, that's not the answer, I have the answer, please apply, get your application in, get your woman-owned business like funded and supported, and those applications are due on June 1st. So Sync Up Colorado.
Great. You should put that in the chat for people to
see that
it can go. Wow, you just threw out so many different things on the employer side, but also on the side of the women themselves that are seeking these, you know, to get back into the business, get back into work, but not just to get back into work, but to get on a path. And do you have anything you want to share on that question set about how to get women back after this pandemic?
Yeah, I think Shannon, that's just phenomenal information and data, and it's a lot of exactly what we need. You know, having a background as an attorney, I always like to think about writing contracts and creating social contracts and understanding the way people are motivated. And what I'm really curious about right now is what's motivating women and what's motivating men, and thinking about how do we dig deep and really understand those pieces. I think is going to be crucial. This is a little statistic back in 2016, but one that I just can't let go of, which is there's an app that you can use on your phone. It's called Busy Kids, and it's an allowance app. And they did a study across 10,000 families, and they found that girls in families were making $6 and I think it was 82 cents a week. Boy identified kids were making $14 a week. And so when you start to think about how we're incenting ourselves and the rules we're setting up on our society from the very get-go, we have a lot of retooling to do. And we really need to think about how does pay equity affect people's decisions and choices. But we also have to think about like what's going on in the house and how we're splitting up those chores, right? So the hacking the household, I think, is really important in thinking about how can we incentivize male identified, especially caregivers, to really participate in a more meaningful and better way. Is it about social status and sort of personal brand? Is it about the financial pieces? But I'm so excited, Janine, that your team and the folks here doing the research are going to be looking into just doing these pieces of research. And I hope that you will include and look at what's incentivizing people, what really matters to people, and how can we think about that as employers and as people and as friends and within our families.
Yeah. So. I'm going to bounce around on my notes here because we're going to only have about 10 more minutes, but I want to turn to this thing. You kind of hit on some of it, but this idea of flexible work, right? So you're talking about hacking the home. We were just also talking about how much we've learned to work more flexibly. And so maybe that can change the way women come back. But let me flip the question, and Danielle, I'll go to you because I think you started this, but what if this flexible work idea actually serves to further sideline working mothers or caregivers by giving these companies excuses to pay them less or to contract out or have sort of like sub full-time, opportunities? How can we assure that this trend towards flexible work doesn't end up doing what happened when people started outsourcing and did all these 1099 worlds and everybody was losing their benefits and such like that? Should we be worried about that? Or is it like all goodness coming from this flexible work thing from a women perspective?
Yeah, nothing's all good and nothing's all bad. I've been saying this long before the pandemic, which is that I think that nobody has better agency over ourselves and what's best for our companies and quite frankly for the world than women. And we're whole people. And so I think about how companies can meet us as whole people in whole ways. And I think about work from home as a part of an overall compensation package. And why don't companies think about just letting people choose, right? Like instead of saying, you're going to work from home and I'm going to pay you less, like what about the whole kit and caboodle? What if every year I could say, here's what I need to be really successful: salary, here's the work hours I needed, and let's just look at that. And every year have folks be able to revise it. And all those packages would be worth the same amount of money to companies. I'm a finance person. I could say for this job, our package is $120,000, but within it, what is the menu of you're a whole person with agency over yourself, completely able to get your job done? Here's the thing. We did that productivity button. People didn't, they used the button during the day and then worked at night. I mean, we are so responsible. We're overly responsible for everything. I don't have this great fear that women are just going to stop working if we let them work from home or from Cancun. Like, we are so good. We are so responsible for everything, right? And so we're all doing 3 jobs, all of us. I guarantee you everyone on this call is doing at least 3 jobs right now in some way or another, right? And so how do you think about overall compensation and within that? And I believe this is the way you should treat all humans. It's the way to achieve inclusive environments. What's the overall way that we want to show you our value? What's it worth to us as a company? And within that, how do you want to show up? What makes the most sense for you? Do you want to come in at 10? Whether you have kids or not, maybe you just don't like people in the morning. That sounds great. Like, great. And just to give people more agency, it's just so structured. The system was built by men for men, by white men for white men. And so for us to think that it's going to work for us just by tweaking the system is a little insane. I just think that's why it's taking so long. It's why it was so easy to get set back with something like a pandemic. And what we really need to think about is like, let's just rethink, like, how much of the system do we actually need? Or is it more about comfort zones? And if we know anything about comfort zones, it's that they don't serve us. And we are stuck in this gigantic comfort zone called the patriarchy. And we are needing to think about it really, really differently moving forward, and letting folks really decide, what does it mean? If you're paying me $100 grand, what does that mean? Does that mean extra days off for me? Because I really like to take long vacations and I'd rather give up the salary. Doesn't mean I get to contribute to charity, right? Like, that's a part of my compensation package at the trust. And I you know, I don't have to pay taxes on it. I can just do it straight from my compensation at the trust. There's things like that where you can really think about, how do we meet people in their whole selves and honor their agency over how they can best operate to get their work done.
It's more about, like, what's your work, what's the work, and how are you going to get it done? Don't tell, I don't have to know, right?
Here's the work, here's what we think it's
over a can of Red Bull, that's on you.
That's right. Lots of people like 3 a.m.ers. I don't know.
I mean, and from an academic perspective, that's how professors have always, I mean, think tanks, and it's not really about punching the clock, but it depends on the job. And I guess we're getting back to, are women focused, targeted into certain types of jobs and certain types of careers where that flexibility is or is not going to be valued, or they'll find ways to make it less pay and so things like that. So those are some of the issues, I think. Let me see some of the other questions that we have. Let's go into this question of companies and how they can ensure that underserved or marginalized communities, LGBTQ, BIPOC, AAPI, women, how can the companies, what can they do to ensure that we have this equal access to these professional opportunities? What can we be doing to create these inclusive company cultures? Experiences on what has and hasn't worked. Let's see, who haven't I tagged yet? Ada, you want to hit that one maybe?
Sure. Yeah, so I was thinking, from the perspective of an employee, and when I started with the new company, I'm always looking for women in leadership roles, right? And people of color in leadership roles. And I just think that's important because it ties into what I believe is the second thing that's important, is like mentorship. I don't know if it would be, part of a program the company would start, but I just think women mentoring women in the workplace is so important to kind of get women up into higher positions. And it could be just like a personal goal. I don't know, like a career goal. I'm gonna, mentor 3-4 women in, a year or something like that. I think that's something I didn't take advantage of when I was younger, and I thought about that. And thirdly, transparency about opportunities and training. There's so many times where I just was not aware of companies training opportunities, or there were roadblocks where I had to fill out a form and tell my manager how it's going to benefit just my team. And then if it didn't benefit my team, then I was past, I couldn't take the training, or I couldn't do the certifications. There's so many companies that have so much training that could get you to the next level of your career, and it's not transparent. It's not available to everyone. It seems like, there's some favoritism, and there's only certain people that get that training or are told about that training. So yeah, I will leave with that. I think those 3 things really stick out in my mind.
Sure. Sonia, you want to address that question at all from your perspective?
I mean, I agree with Ada that representation 100% matters, and that representation needs to be beyond tokenization, right? Like, I don't know how many times I've been the token lesbian or LGBTQ member or Hispanic or whatever, or even woman in the room, and they consider it, we're great, we have representation.
Check the block.
And exactly. And I think that is, I honestly think in this space, radical movements need to happen. Because there's we are not naturally creating diversity in businesses. We're trying to approach it from the way that we approach everything, systemic, itemized way of bringing diversity in, and that will never work. And I think we really need to move from wanting people to assimilate into a culture, and even not to even have a differentiation culture, but to have a belonging culture. And that means to belong, you need to have so many people around you that are also different, that no one is unique in the space because we're all bringing our uniqueness as a group. And so what I have seen work recently, actually, I was just part of sorry, I'm trying to remember get the correct name. It's a leadership, inclusive leadership program to actually facilitate discussions around this. And they intentionally went and recruited people who would have experiences of the diversity topics we were teaching on. Like, to me, that is a smart way to run a workshop that you need to have perspective in to be able to run discussions where the person actually has lived the topics you're going to be talking about. And I think that companies need to be willing to do, like, I think Dee spoke it perfectly, where this isn't equal, it's equity. And that's a whole different ballgame, because there needs to be targeted and intentional actions made by leaders, and they got to be willing to get uncomfortable, because it's not going to be pretty in the beginning phases. And I think that's one of the biggest obstacles.
Just getting people saying you have a team or a company that's diverse. Okay, now the hard work starts.
Yes.
Right. It's like, okay, all these people are here and they can't talk to each other. Like, how are we gonna do this, right? Yeah, we that's where we are at the university. You know, we want to be this inclusive, but also diverse. So, okay, now we got to get to that next level.
Yeah,
make people feel like they belong and that they're heard. And it's not easy. We have all kinds of biases that we don't even know about. I'm going to move on to one other topic, and then we'll probably do a wrap up. But we're going to take it up to the running your own business. You know, lack of funding and resources for women-owned businesses can often be big hurdles. I'm wondering what our community leaders or what we can do for each other to ensure that there's better support for these women-owned businesses. I think I'll kick this to Patrice. She's dropped off my screen. Where did she go?
Sure, I'm still here.
There she is.
Yeah. You know, so there's a lot of different opportunities for women business owners out there. I think the starting place is you have to figure out what you really need. You have to learn how to back that up with some financials that make sense to other people, so that when you go and present your story, whether it's to friends and family, or it's to the bank, or it's to companies, you know, places like Colorado Lending Source that have amazing programs specifically designed for women-led businesses, women-owned businesses. You've got to have your story straight in order for them to be on top of it and say, yes, we want to invest in you. And that's typically what we see, having worked with a lot of accelerators that specialize in helping small business owners get their companies going in a variety of different ways with resources, including funding. That's one of the biggest hurdles that we see, is women really struggle to get that story pulled together and to deliver it with confidence and certainty about, yes, I am going to work through this and make it happen as a business. So I think that's the starting point. There's a lot of places that if you are in that space and you're trying to figure that out, encourage you to get connected in with groups like Rocky Venture Club, Thai Denver, and there's a myriad of only women focused, but I don't think that's always the best idea. I think it's good to be around male and female counterparts in that, because you'll hear what the male feedback is. And unfortunately, most of the investors, more than 80%, are male. So you got to learn how to speak to that audience. But there are a ton of those different opportunities out there. It's an uphill battle. I won't lie about that. Women, the funding for women is like 10%, and then, you know, against males, against their male counterparts. So it's very, very small numbers, big uphill battle. There are, fortunately, in Colorado, more than double the amount of women investing groups like angel investing, VC groups, et cetera, that are coming out specifically to focus on women. So if you need information about that, my information on LinkedIn is in the chat, and I can connect you with potential sources.
Very good. Okay, so we're completely out of time, and I'm going to give every one of the panelists sort of one sentence or even one word to end with. What is the one thing that you see being vital to getting women back in the workforce in the post-pandemic era? We'll start with Sonia.
I'm going to go with female community.
Community, great. Shannon.
I would say leverage the systems of trust for women that already exist, like the Women's Chamber of Commerce, that to help create a comprehensive workforce system that meets the unique challenges we face and help reimagine what's possible.
Awesome. Danielle.
Yeah, I don't do one word well either. You know, I was
Sentence then.
I really genuinely believe we have the answers. And so I think the best way to do this is to listen and then get out of the way.
Get out of the way. Ada.
So
Ida, sorry.
That's okay. So based on my experience, I would say opportunities for women to upskill and reskill with professional certifications and training.
Concrete. Anne.
Not accepting the status quo, just holding ourselves to that.
Excellent. And Patrice, you get the last word. Or
I'm with Sonia on this. Networking women, networking with women, and grow your network. Males too, but you know, get the women in there.
Excellent, excellent. Shannon, I thought you were going to say, stop that shit. That's
Okay.
Yeah, that's like the quote of the night. So, all right. I just want to say thank you to everyone. Lots of ideas coming up in the chat. I'm going to turn it back over to Kristin, who can take us home. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much, Dr. Davidson, and to all of our panelists. Wow. Talk about a group of highly accomplished, intelligent, amazing women. You know, just a reminder, look at the chat. There's so many great ideas in there. You all, I can't remember which panelist said it. I think it was Danielle. We have the answers to this. I think the great thing about this executive conversation series is that we're going to be able to track it, you know, with Metro State University's help and report it back out to the community. So we are really looking forward to presenting our findings and how we get women back to work later in September. So before we close out the evening, we're so lucky to have two amazing women close us out. So first up, on behalf of the Denver Mayor's Office, I always love to hear from Gloria Neal, the Director of Public Affairs. So thanks for being with us, Gloria, and help us bring it home.
Oh, you are welcome, Kristin. This was absolutely wonderful. And I love how nobody checked themselves at the door. Janine always brings it. Kristin, honey, don't even get me started, but some of the panelists, I'm like, oh my gosh. And then some of them I know, some of them I don't, but all of you were like, oh my gosh, for that matter. So thank you, Kristin, for the leadership. I am proud to know some of all of the panelists and some of the women who were in attendance tonight. I'm glad to be among you. I always tip my hat at the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce, and I know a lot of obstacles are in place for women for a variety of reasons, even in a regular workplace and a regular economy. But what we are going through right now requires we put on some super shero capes. And it also requires that we learn how to lean on each other. We don't do that good because we're so used to getting it done and dealing with whatever angst we have inside. We deal with it as best we can. So it is good to have someone say, you know what, it is okay, ladies, you are knocking it out of the park. It also requires that our judgment of each other and the pettiness, that we push that aside, because right now we are all on the Titanic. Either we are going to make this boat stay upright or we are all going down. So there is no better way of tackling the challenge of women experiencing unemployment in any other way than to face it head on. And I always like to say, women, when we are determined, we are like a good pair of pantyhose, honey. We are resilient. We do not give up. Now, I would definitely be remiss if I did not thank Lisa Martinez Templeton from the Department of Finance and Jonathan Steiner from DIDO. I love what they do because the numbers don't lie. Whether you like them or not, they are right there in your face and they are there for a reason. So far beyond the past recessions, this pandemic has destroyed the financial stability for many families. You think about industries dominated by women have been hit the hardest. We know this. I talked to Kristin early on in this pandemic, and just like her, I hadn't pivoted yet. Like, okay, I know I have this job, but what about the other things I had signed up for? What about this virtual event? Or how are we going to do this? I mean, virtual, I didn't even think would work as good. But because it's what we've left with, if there's one thing we know how to do, ladies, that is pivot. We must make what we have to make, especially if we're the top breadwinner. So I will say that women who are recovering their pay at a much slower rate than men, that would be all of us, know that that will change the more we push this issue, the more we push forward. For one, I know this city has the talent and the desire and the grit. I see it all the time. I look at the talent pool within the city. I also look at the talent pool on today's event, and I think we are going to be all right. But for so long, we didn't think that. A year seemed like we aged 10 years. Denver's leadership team in the Hancock administration is keenly aware of the disproportionate impact of the pandemic, especially on women of color. And as a woman, as a Black woman, as an influencer, a wife, a public servant, and a woman's health podcast host, you didn't know that, did you? That, right? People are like, what'd she say? Every podcast, it's every woman, EVRE, check that out. But I believe women can do anything when they are healthy. And I'm talking about physically, mentally, and spiritually. You've got to be healthy. And I also believe that women in Denver can not only come back, but we will do better and we will be better than we were in 2020. A lot of times we'll say, just let me get back to that weight. Let me get back to that. How about saying, I want to go beyond that. I want to be better than I was when I was better. All of those things make us get up. And so we also have to give ourselves some grace. Give ourselves a break, ladies. It was a pandemic and we are still in it. Even though there's a light and the light doesn't appear to be a train, but you know, I'm still wearing my mask. All of those things ring true, but it's okay if you were down, if you were depressed, if you were feeling melancholy. It's okay if you were challenged. These were challenging times and still are. Again, it's a pandemic. The last time someone went through a pandemic, they're no longer alive. We are living through a historic event and we will get through it whether you gained weight or not. You're still gorgeous. How about that? You are enough. So in closing, at my core, there's no question I am a glass half full chick, right? I am somebody who says, yeah, that was jacked up, or yeah, you don't like me for a variety of reasons, or yeah, but those are all your issues. I'm going to keep going, and going. If I have to go around you, if I have to go under you, if I have to go over you, but I'm not going to be stopped. And many of you have that same thing. I am so thrilled to just be here and experience what I'm experiencing with you all tonight. And I think that overall, the leadership team knows that we have a terrific pool of women. We are not sitting back and waiting. You heard about the RISE program tonight. We are not sitting back and waiting. Again, RISE standing for Rebuilding an Inclusive and Sustainable Economy. We cannot do that without women. We shouldn't even try. And yes, we can be more productive from home. That was Gloria, not the mayor. but he feels the same way in the sense that this has been very eye-opening in many ways. So I just want to say thank you. Thank you so very much for this opportunity and also for all that you are doing, because you see the issues, and just like so many other things, women are leading the way. And with that, I want to introduce a very good friend of mine, someone who is a very hardworking lady. She definitely wears a cape because she answers emails at 2 a.m. I'm talking about the Colorado Women's Chamber of Commerce's Board of Directors Chair, Leanna Clark. She is the CEO of the Girl Scouts of Colorado. And Leanna, I want to thank you for your leadership, not just for this organization, but also for the Girl Scouts. Please take it away.
Thank you, Glo. It is such an honor to be introduced by my dear, dear friend, Glo. I have never been a pantyhose fan, and I have certainly not worn them in the last 18 months, but I get the idea. And I love what you said. We are going to be all right. We are enough. You are so right, Glo. And this has just been an amazing evening. I am so grateful to be here with you tonight and to be part of an organization that addresses these topics, because it's going to take all of us, not just women, to support women as they return to work and to keep women in the workforce and to help women-owned businesses grow. And I just can't wait to see what solutions come out of this amazing event tonight. One of the things that I took away from tonight is this idea of mentoring women to ensure that they have the scaffolding to be successful and to rejoin the workforce and to succeed in male-dominated industries. And what Anne said about not accepting the status quo, I love that. And we need to start young. It made me think about what we do at Girl Scouts and made me proud of what we do at Girl Scouts. How do we reach out to our girls to show them the opportunities that exist, to ensure that they don't see women leaving the workforce as their model? Instead, we mentor them and role model for them what is possible. That's one of the things I'll take away, and I encourage all of you to take something you learned tonight and see how you can use it to support your teams, your offices, your coworkers, your businesses, your colleagues, your daughters, your nieces. Thanks again for being here tonight for our 5th annual State of Women in Business events. Thanks to TARRA, our speakers, our sponsors, to HealthOne, and my fellow board members. It's just a fabulous organization, and to the Women's Chamber staff and Kristin. Thank you all. Have a great evening and join us back in September as we present our recommendations for getting women back to work. Have a great evening.